Hello and welcome to a new edition of our program, Peace Be Upon You. And in this edition of our program, we are picking up where we left in the previous episodes, addressing the relationship between international humanitarian law and Islamic jurisprudence. And today we are joined by our dear guest, Dr. Hossam Ed-Deen Allam, lecturer of international humanitarian law. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me.
Sir, can you first give us an overview of what we have covered so far?
Yes, this is definitely very useful for our dear viewers to be on the same page with us, especially because of the academic nature of the themes and the topics that we are covering in this series of episodes, highlighting and addressing the relationship between the international humanitarian law, or the IHL, on one hand, and the Islamic jurisprudence on the other. And this is very important, and as a matter of fact, there is a growing concern in the academia, and we find, as a matter of fact, many law students from all over the world, they are developing more and more interest in the study of IHL, or international humanitarian law. So this is why the aim of this series of episodes is to simplify these concepts, notions, principles, and issues pertaining to international humanitarian law, and also highlighting and addressing, in order to maximize the benefit of these episodes, to highlight the issues also from an Islamic perspective, or from an Islamic fiqhi or jurisprudential and legal perspective. So as has been mentioned before, the international humanitarian law, or IHL, or as known to be the law of armed conflict, or the law of war, and the name, which is international humanitarian law, actually it came to be the chosen one because, as a matter of fact, it reflects the biggest concern behind the agreement on the rules of IHL, or the law of war, or the law of armed conflict, because the concern is maintaining the human dignity, and the concern is giving precedence for humanity and humanitarian concerns over any military necessity. Because, and this is very important here, because there is also this subtle nexus between international humanitarian law and peace building. Because with the last bullet shot, there is always the need for peace talks. There is always the need for, if necessary, agreeing on a ceasefire. And this very dire need to reach a permanent state of ending hostilities, or ending the acts of war. So one big reason as to the importance of international humanitarian law is, and observing the rules of the IHL, is the fact that observing these rules ensures that there is a room for people coming together. I mean here by the people, the parties to the armed conflict, the parties to the war. So maintaining and observing the rules of international humanitarian law ensures that there is this room and this common space for holding peace talks, for all also reconciliation efforts, and for conflict management efforts, and conflict resolution, and conflict transformation endeavors, and peace building to be meaningful. So it is safe to clearly state that the observing of the rules of international humanitarian law ensures that there is this room for people coming together again and coexisting together again through reaching a just solution, through the talks, through the mediation efforts, and all the efforts that I have highlighted in order to start building peace. So it is also safe in this regard to clearly state that the aim of international humanitarian law is to maintain the dignity of all human beings. And this is why it is also important in this regard to highlight the fact that once there is a state of war or an armed conflict occurs, the rules of international humanitarian law become applicable, become enforceable, and very worthy and necessary to be observed and respected, and they apply to all the parties, irrespective of the cause of the hostilities or irrespective of the motive behind this war, and irrespective of who started it. Another important thing, and it is regardless of this is an international conflict, i.e. involving two states or two countries or more, or this happens to be an internal conflict within the borders of one country or one state. So irrespective of who started the war, irrespective of the cause of the war, the rules of international humanitarian law are to be applied and are to be observed by all parties. And this is why, and it is very worth mentioning here in this regard, there are principles that are agreed on, they are developed, and they are agreed on by all nations, by all communities, and by all countries in order to, as I said earlier and as I highlighted earlier, in order to ensure that the humanity and the dignity of all human beings is respected, maintained, and observed, and to ensure that there is always this constant effort in order to minimize the effects of hostilities and the atrocities that wars usually bring about.
Dear viewers, short break and we'll be back, so stay tuned.
ولقد كرمنا بني آدم وحملناهم في البر والبحر ورزقناهم من الطيبات وفضلناهم على كثير ممن خلقنا تفضيلا.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. And we have certainly honored the children of Adam and carried them on the land and sea and provided for them of the good things and preferred them over much of what we have created with preference. Islam came to make the human soul holier than the honorable Al-Kaaba and the holy months. The Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, Allah has made your blood, i.e. soul, your property, and your honor as sacred as this day of yours, in this town of yours, in this month of yours. He then said, have I conveyed Allah's message? The people answered him, saying, yes, you have indeed. Abdullah ibn Umar looked at the Kaaba and said, how honorable is you, how delectable is your smell, how great and sacred is your sanctity. Nevertheless, the believer's sanctity is greater than yours in the sight of Allah. His blood, property, and honor are sacred. Belief requires that a believer must not be a source of frightening or intimidation to others. One of the all-encompassing statements of the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, is that faith prevents assassination. A believer should not assassinate, like shackles that tie one's hands so that he cannot harm others. Faith keeps a believer so shackled that he would not assault others. A believer is so honorable that he does not hurt others. Some of the prophetic hadiths stressed that killing a believer is more grievous before Allah than the extinction of the whole world, and that if the inhabitants of the heavens and the inhabitants of the earth all took part in shedding the blood of a believer, Allah would cast them all in the hellfire.
Assalamualaikum waalaikum salam.
Welcome back, dear viewers, and we are still hosting Dr. Hossam Ed-Deen Allam, Lecturer of International Humanitarian Law, and we are talking about the principles of international humanitarian law. Yes, Dr. Hossam.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me again. It's always a pleasure to be here with you and with all our dear viewers of Nile TV International. Definitely, this is a very important topic, and as a matter of fact, I do think that it constitutes part and parcel of this series, which aims to highlight the nexus or the relationship between the international humanitarian law and the Islamic jurisprudence.
Yes. So, Dr. Hossam, what are the main principles of international humanitarian law and the objectives behind them?
Yeah, this is definitely a very important and a very worthwhile follow-up question in this regard. As I said earlier, all nations and all communities and civilizations across the centuries, they have realized, and there is a growing, as a matter of fact, recognition since time immemorial, as a matter of fact, all the way to our time and era nowadays, of the importance of injecting and inserting humanity and humanitarian concerns even during times of war, and not only during peace times. And this is why when we carefully and thoroughly analyze and look into and investigate the literature that has to do with the rules that need to be observed by all parties, even during times of war, we can clearly see that there are three major principles that all nations, all civilizations, and all countries, as a matter of fact, and states, clearly, as per the four Geneva Conventions, are agreed on, and these three main principles are agreed on. And they are namely the principle of distinction, the principle of proportionality, as well as the principle of precautions. And what you mentioned in your question is very important, because as a matter of fact, they function together, because the three of them, the three principles all together, again, the principle of distinction, the principle of proportionality, as well as the principle of precautions, all of them, they aim to form an objective unity that represents a tool in order to minimize the human cost of wars and to ensure that the dignity of all human beings is maintained, observed, and respected. Because I'm sure we can recall, and our dear viewers with us, they can recall what we already have mentioned, what has been mentioned in the previous episodes, that one of the main areas of international humanitarian law is the protection of the individuals who are not, or who are no longer taking part in the armed conflict, i.e. those who are not combatants, those who are not fighting. So these three principles together, the principle of distinction, the principle of proportionality, and the principle of precautions, they aim to achieve this very important and noble objective, and that's to bring about this aspect of humanizing even an armed conflict by maintaining, as I said, and that I repeat because of its importance, the dignity of all human beings, even if it is a state of war.
What is the principle or the origin regarding international relations in Islam? Is it peace or conflict and war?
Yeah, this is definitely a very meaningful question, as a matter of fact, in this regard, because I'm sure it can be seen and clearly understood and inferred from the mentioning of these three principles together, is that they represent an exceptional case.
Yes.
Or they represent a state of necessity.
Yes.
So clearly, this is the result of the fact that war is seen or is observed to be an exceptional case or an exceptional situation, because the answer to your very important question in this regard is that all the Muslim scholars in this regard, or at least we can safely state that the sweeping majority of both early Muslim scholars as well as the contemporary ones, for them the maintained prevailing standpoint or stand as far as the Islamic jurisprudence is concerned is that peace and nothing but peace is the origin or is the principle or the governing principle, and this is what the Muslim scholars refer to as al-asl.
Yes.
That's the governing principle. When it comes to international relations, and specifically when it comes to relations between Muslims and non-Muslim sovereigns and communities, they maintain that it is actually peace and it is not war, and they also maintain the position that war is only an intervening factor, and it is only justified or becomes justifiable when there is an aggression on one's homeland or when there is an oppression because of one's faith and belief. So this is why it is very important, as we are highlighting the relationship, or if you like, the nexus between the international humanitarian law and Islamic jurisprudence. It is very important in this regard to highlight the fact that peace is the governing principle as far as relations between Muslims and non-Muslim sovereigns and communities is concerned. Why? Because, as I said earlier, we can clearly see now that peace and peaceful coexistence and maintaining peaceful relations, this represents the norm. This represents the dominant situation that needs to be always there. And we can, as a matter of fact, here in this regard, highlight key Quranic quotes and also very relevant teachings from the Sunnah or from the life and the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, in this regard. And I'm highlighting these two principles in particular, specifically, because they constitute the two foundational sources of the Islamic jurisprudence. So it is very vital, I do think, that in this context, to highlight the proofs behind this standpoint or this viewpoint that peace is a principle between Muslims and non-Muslim relations, or are as far as relations between both parties are concerned. And also it is very worthwhile to provide the right understanding for some of the most commonly misunderstood or decontextualized verses and quotes from the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, as well as, of course, from the Quran. So, for instance, in this regard, we clearly see in the Noble Quran the verse that, as a matter of fact, summarizes and encapsulates all the message of Islam and the mission of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, as well as the mission of all prophets and the messengers, as we read in the Noble Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ.
وما أرسلناك إلا رحمة للعالمين.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate, and we have not sent you except as a mercy to the worlds.
O Muhammad, we have not, and this is the royal we here, we have not sent you except as a mercy to all the worlds.
Yes.
So we clearly see in the wording here and in the phraseology of this Quranic verse, how is it this mercy, as a matter of fact, is for all beings. And this is why, to add further emphasis on this point in particular, and to preclude and to remove any limitation with regards to this mercy to all beings, the Prophet, peace be upon him, is authentically reported to have said in this regard, those who do not show mercy, or those who are not merciful towards other beings, will not be shown mercy, or they will not be treated with mercy, i.e. from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here, this is a very serious and critical issue, that denying mercy to other beings, whether they are human beings, animals, or even plants, denying all these beings mercy from an Islamic perspective is the reason for being deprived of being shown mercy by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful and the entirely merciful. And of course, it is common knowledge as far as the Islamic teachings are concerned, that a woman deserved punishment in hellfire because of a cat that she locked up and did not provide the cat with food and water, and didn't even leave the cat alone to eat from the vermin of the land or the earth. So denying mercy and showing this harshness towards this innocent animal was the reason for punishment by hellfire from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the contrary, we know of in one narration a woman and in another a man who deserved reward with paradise for doing his best, or doing her best, or doing their best in order to provide water for a very thirsty dog that couldn't have access to water or have the accessibility to reach water. And how is it? It is common knowledge, as I said, in the Islamic traditions, that showing this mercy to this innocent animal was a reason for this person to be deserving of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being rewarded with paradise. So all this makes it clear that the message of Islam, and therefore the teachings of Islam, and consequently the treatment of Muslims with each other, as well as towards fellow non-Muslims, this treatment has to do with only with showing mercy towards others. Furthermore, we clearly see in the Noble Quran, in this regard, a very striking, noble verse. And as a matter of fact, it's a verse that we highlighted in the previous episode, but it is worth repetition and emphasis. And that's the verse in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it clear that the concept of dignity is a very comprehensive concept that encompasses and comprises all human beings, irrespective of one's ethnicity, irrespective of one's nationality, color of skin, or any other consideration, male or female, or rich or poor, whatever class in society. Yes. Irrespective of any consideration, this dignity is provided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to all human beings. And that's the verse in Surah Al-Isra, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us clearly, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُمْ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَرَزَقْنَاهُم مِّنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ ممن خلقنا تفضيلا.
ولقد كرمنا بني آدم وحملناهم في البر والبحر ورزقناهم من الطيبات وفضلناهم على كثير ممن خلقنا تفضيلا.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate, and we have certainly honored the children of Adam and carried them on the land and sea, and provided for them of the good things, and preferred them over much of what we have created, with preference.
So if we were here to pause and just focus on the wording of this verse in particular, we clearly see how it starts with وَلَقَدْ. So, and it is very well known here, this is as if it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself swearing or making an oath or taking an oath. And also we see the emphasis of laqad, that's indeed, verily, undoubtedly, that this honor and this dignity is afforded to all human beings.
ولقد كرمنا بني آدم وحملناهم في البر والبحر ورزقناهم من الطيبات وفضلناهم على كثير ممن خلقنا تفضيلا.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate, and we have certainly honored the children of Adam and carried them on the land and sea, and provided for them of the good things, and preferred them over much of what we have created, with preference.
I'd like to thank you, Dr. Hossam Ed-Deen Allam, Lecturer of International Humanitarian Law. Thank you, sir, for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And by that, dear viewers, we come to the end of today's edition of our program, Peace Be Upon You. Thank you for watching.
Assalamualaikum waalaikumsalam. Assalamualaikum